Hello, Rabbi Rubinstein in New York, standing in for Rabbi Chapnick for the JLE in Los Angeles. This week's Parsha is the Parsha of Reeh. And the Parsha of Reeh starts off with an incredibly important message. Let me read this to you. I'm setting before you, says God, today a blessing and a curse. The blessing is if you keep the Torah. The curse is if you don't. Now, this is obviously a massive oversimplification because we all know of great saintly people who suffer and very bad people who prosper. The famous classic question of tzaddik baraloi, why a saintly person who has a horrible life. But leaving that aside for a second, I'd like to speak about something else which is tremendously important, and that is the language. You see, it was dictated by Hashem to Moshe Rabbeinu. Every single word counts. And I don't know if you remember back in the day, very often stores that sold computers would leave just the box, the shell of the computer, as a display item in the front window in case somebody would smash the window and steal it. Of course, the computer doesn't work. That's just the outside. The inside, that's what makes the thing work. That's precisely what happens when you translate Hebrew into another language. It happens, incidentally, when you translate any language into another language. As somebody once said, every translator is a commentator. And I've translated 5 books. And my first attempt, I tried to be as faithful as I possibly could be to the original Hebrew. And that was a disaster. Because I had to say to myself, if the author was alive today, 1,000 years later, then how would he say it in today's idiom, in today's language? Because he's trying to speak to us in today's language. So every translator is a commentator. And it might be that a word in Hebrew has got several possible implications, which you are going to lose when you choose an English word to represent only one of those. Whereas all of them written by God were meant to be conveyed in the original Hebrew. If that's true, let me read to you what the Art Scroll, no criticism, Art Scroll is wonderful, but how they translate that posuk which I read to you before. Let me read to you in my translation, then we'll look at theirs, and now I'll tell you what's wrong with translating it. See, behold, I set before you today, bracha v'klola, blessing and curse. How did Art Scroll translate it? See, I present before you today a blessing and a curse. I'm not really going to argue with that, but I would point out that what we've got there is just the box of the computer, not the insides. We have selected one aspect and left behind so much more. And this is a particularly good example. You see, the Hebrew that I translated, and if you're good at Hebrew, you'll know this, Re'eh is in the singular. It's what you would say to somebody, look, if you're talking to one person. And I am setting before all of you, then it's a plural. But that disappears, that difference, that distinction, that critical understanding disappears when you translate it into English. Because in English, back to the Art Scroll, see, I present before you today a blessing and a curse. See, in English, doesn't convey that it's in the singular. Before you, in English, doesn't convey that the original is in the plural. Why is it that God speaks in the singular when really he's speaking to all of the Jewish people? And the answer is quite simple. Just like at Mount Sinai, when we stood at the foot and God spoke to us, we heard him speaking to us in the singular. Yehuda Yoina Rubinstein, that's me, by the way. I am the Lord your God. Everybody heard God speaking to them, but he spoke to them as an individual. I don't know what your politics are and who you want to win the presidential election in a couple of months' time, but normally it is the case that if somebody gets a 60% majority in our system, then he'll be feeling really very good about himself or herself. And if it's 70%, wow. And who'd complain? It would be a landslide if it was 80%. And unbelievable, 90%. Would Donald Trump, if he wins, or Kamala Harris, if she wins, be upset with the 10% who didn't vote for them? I don't think so. But Hashem is upset, worried, concerned if one Jew is not going on to keep the mitzvahs. Because, of course, every Jew is connected to every other Jew. It's not just about me, it's about us. And when the Jewish people are together, are united, well, as we see in Shabbos Mincha, in the Amidah and the Shemona Esra, Atah Echad, the Shimcha Echad, the Mika Amcha Yisrael Go Echad Ba'oretz. The nature of God is one. Atah Echad. And your name is one. Your name represents that. And who's like your people, the Jewish people? When we're one people, when we realize that each one is important, critically important for all the rest. It's very important to get to the original Hebrew. I wish you all a wonderful Shabbos.